Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
Now, this is a compressed structural companion to our deep dive on this topic, designed to really deconstruct the systems behind our modern myths, and we have to start here with this quote. Because really, if you want to understand any system, you have to first understand the narrative it's running on.
All right, so let's get right into it. The big idea here is to completely reframe how we look at superhero mythology. We're not talking about simple entertainment. No. Think of it as a complex, adaptive system.
So what exactly is a cultural operating system? Well, imagine it's like an engine, right? It's constantly taking in the raw fuel of what we're all feeling as a culture, our fears, our hopes, our ambitions, and it processes all that stuff into stories. But here's the kicker. These aren't just stories. This system is out there, right now, actively shaping how you and I see the world and what we think is even possible.
And probably the best way to get your head around this is to think of it as a cultural ecosystem. It's this living, breathing world of ideas. And just like in the real world, the characters, the concepts, they're like organisms. They have to adapt and evolve to survive, especially when things get tough.
So what are these things that get tough? What are these pressures we're talking about? Well, just like any ecosystem, this one gets pushed and pulled by some really powerful forces from the outside world.
And a lot of the time, these pressures are huge geopolitical shocks. I mean, think about it. World War II, the deep paranoia of the Cold War, 9/11. Every single one of those events sent a massive shockwave through this whole story system, and it completely changed the kinds of heroes we felt we needed and the kinds of stories they had to tell.
And you can see the cause and effect so clearly here. During World War II, the superhero wasn't just popular, it felt essential, a symbol of righteous power. But then, fast forward to the post-war era, with all that atomic fear and existential dread in the air, and suddenly that same hero felt well, irrelevant. The whole genre almost fizzled out just because the cultural weather changed.
But it's not all about big global events. You got to look at the money too. Market forces are a huge driver. I mean, look at what happened when comics moved from being sold on every newsstand to being sold in these niche, specialty, direct market shops. The whole product changed, almost overnight. The stories got way more specialized, way more intense, and they were suddenly being made for a much smaller, hardcore audience.
So you've got these two massive forces, right? Global politics on one side and market economics on the other, and they are constantly steering how these stories evolve. But the crazy part is, the system's response to all this, it isn't random at all. It actually follows a really predictable, recurring cycle.
And we see this cycle play out over and over again in these distinct ages. It usually starts with a bright, optimistic golden age, often born out of some huge crisis. But that can't last. Inevitably, it gives way to a dark age. This is where you get all the cynicism, the deconstruction, think the Dark Knight Returns, where creators are just ripping those old myths to shreds. And then after all that, you get a renaissance, a moment where the pieces are put back together into something new, something that often brings back a little bit of that hope.
So what you have is this constant churning process of destruction and rebirth. Each new generation of creators is basically reacting to whatever the last one did. And all of this whole cycle, it builds a system that is just incredibly, incredibly hard to kill.
I mean, think about it for a second. Why does this thing persist? So many other kinds of stories and characters have come and gone, right? They just fade away, but not these guys. So what is it? What gives this particular ecosystem such amazing staying power?
Well, for one thing, you've got the corporate trademark. That S shield, the spider web, the bat symbol, these things are legally locked down. They act like a stable genetic code, an anchor. And as long as that anchor is there, everything else can change around it. The story, the tone, the deeper meaning, it can all adapt to whatever's happening in the world, and the core brand is never broken. Okay, second reason. This system is brilliant at creating its own successors. Think about it. Each new generation of writers and artists, they grew up with these characters. They're inspired to come in and add their own layer of paint to these cultural totems. They're the ones who transfuse the system with fresh energy, keeping it relevant until the next generation is ready to take the reins.
And the last piece of the puzzle is this amazing structural flexibility. The best analogy I've heard is that these characters are like a 12-bar blues, you know? The basic chord progression is super simple, everyone recognizes it. But that simple structure is exactly what lets all these different creators come in and play wildly different kinds of music on top of it. It means you can adapt it in almost infinite ways.
Okay, so all of this, the cycles, the pressures, the persistence,
It all leads us to the most crucial point, and this is really the heart of this entire explainer. It's the interconnection between this whole fictional ecosystem and our own real world. And this quote, this just nails it. It gets right to the heart of the crisis, because these stories that we so often just write off as silly, disposable fun, they've always been a direct line, a hotline, straight into our cultural subconscious. They're like a real-time EKG, showing us all the anxieties and convulsions happening deep inside our culture.
And that right there is the crisis in perception. It's the fact that we dismiss this incredibly powerful cultural engine as just escapist fantasy. And because we do that, we completely fail to see what it's actually doing. We're blind to how it's not just reflecting, but actively shaping our real-world views on huge things like power, identity, and justice.
We don't recognize that this whole thing, it isn't some fantasy mud hole we go to escape reality. It's an operating table. It's a laboratory where the biggest ideas in our culture are being pulled apart, examined, and put back together again.
And on that table, the patient is us.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.